Imagine being 10 years old. You're sitting in this incredibly sweltering classroom in Western India,
Right.
and the year is 1901. And you are just, absolutely dying of thirst.
Yeah, kids that age, I mean, they need water.
Exactly. Your throat is completely parched. You can't even concentrate on the lesson. But the absolute cruelest part is that there is a water tap literally right outside the door.
Oh, wow.
So close.
Right, you can see it, but you are physically forbidden from touching it.
Because of the caste system.
Exactly. If you turn that handle, if your fingers even so much as, like, graze the metal, the school authorities, well, really the entire town,
Okay.
they will consider that water source fundamentally contaminated.
So you're just forced to sit there. You just have to sit and wait.
Yeah.
You have to wait for this specific school worker, like a peon, to show up. Because only he is allowed to turn the tap. And then he has to pour the water from a pretty significant height into your cupped hands.
Right, to make sure there's no contact. Exactly. Ensuring not a single drop touches your skin and bounces back onto the tap. You can't ever touch the vessel.
But wait, what if that worker just decides not to show up that day? Or, I don't know, just doesn't feel like helping you?
Well, then you just don't drink.
Mm-hmm.
You sit in the extreme heat, and you suffer from dehydration while you're literally surrounded by perfectly clean water.
Gosh, that is just a horrifying reality.
It really is.
And today, for our deep dive, we are looking at this massive stack of sources, like scholarly articles, critical reviews, artistic analyses.
Right, some pretty dense material today.
Yeah, very dense. And it's all centered on this groundbreaking graphic book that takes that exact historical horror we just talked about, and it translates it visually.
And they don't just draw, a sad, sweating boy.
No.
They draw the child's torso morphing into a literal fish,
Yes.
like a fish gasping for air on dry land right there on the page.
It's an unbelievable visual. So the book we're analyzing today, it's called Bhimayana, Experiences of Untouchability.
Published back in 2011, right?
Yeah, 2011 by Navayana, which is this independent publishing house. And the book chronicles the life of Dr. B.R. Ambedkar.
Which, I mean, for those listening who might not be super familiar with Indian history, Dr. Ambedkar is just this towering, monumental figure.
Absolutely.
He was the chief architect of the Indian Constitution. An incredibly brilliant scholar, he earned dual doctorates from Columbia University in New York and the London School of Economics.
Which is just wild for that time period.
Oh, completely. And he was a relentless, lifelong champion for Dalit rights.
Right, and Dalits being the communities that were historically relegated to the absolute bottom of the rigid Hindu caste system.
Right, subjected to the practice of, quote-unquote, untouchability.
Exactly. So our mission today for this deep dive is to basically act as your guides, your personal professors, through this really dense, fascinating academic discourse around the book.
Because the sources, they throw around some really heavy terminology.
Oh yeah, like post-colonial critical literacy.
Yes, and multimodality.
Contemporaneity, all those $5 words.
Right, exactly. So we are going to take every single one of those concepts, strip away the academic jargon, and explain exactly how they work in plain language.
Because once you understand the mechanics of this book, it really does fundamentally alter how you view history.
And how you consume art, honestly.
Yeah. And how you decode the sort of invisible social hierarchies operating in your own life right now.
Definitely. And we really, we have to start decoding right from the cover.
Oh, the title.
Yeah, the title itself is doing an enormous amount of heavy lifting here, Bhimayana.
Right.
To anyone who's familiar with South Asian culture or literature, that suffix, that ayana suffix, immediately triggers a very specific cultural association.
Because it sounds exactly like the Ramayana.
Exactly.
And the Ramayana is one of the foundational, ancient, deeply revered Hindu epics. Like, it tells the story of the god King Ram.
Right.
So by naming this book Bhimayana, are they like explicitly trying to draw a comparison there?
Oh, it is a deliberate, highly audacious subversion. Yeah. In mainstream Hindu tradition, the figure of Ram is often revered as the Maryada Purushottama, which essentially translates to the supreme ideal man who perfectly upholds cosmic and social duty.
Like the ultimate traditional hero.
Right. So by titling this work Bhimayana, which literally translates to Bim's journey, referring to Bhimrao Ambedkar, the creators are positioning a Dalit man as the new epic hero.
Wow, which is a massive paradigm shift.
Completely.
Because under the traditional caste hierarchy, the Varna system, Dalits were considered outcasts. I mean, they weren't even on the bottom rung of the ladder.
No, they were considered outside the ladder entirely.
Right. So to take a man from that marginalized background and elevate his life story to the status of an ion, an epic journey, that is an incredibly bold statement before you even open to page 1.
It's a classic subaltern strategy, actually. Our sources note how this reflects wider political movements.
Like what?
Like the tactics used by the Bahujan Samaj Party in India during the 1990s. They would take traditional mainstream folk songs and epics and rewrite them.
Oh, really?
Yeah, they would literally swap out characters like Kaushalya Rani, the mother of Ram, and replace her with Dr. Ambedkar's mother in the lyrics.
That is fascinating.
It's a way of reclaiming the cultural narrative.
Yeah.
So the title Bhimayana is essentially a declaration of a counter-epic.
Okay, I love that. A counter-epic.
Yeah, it says to the reader, the traditional heroes upheld a system that oppressed millions. So here's a new ideal, a new hero who fought to dismantle that system.
Okay, so you have this incredibly weighty, epic title. You open the book, and you're probably expecting to be transported to some sweeping mythological past, right?
Right, or at least a very formal historical setting.
Exactly. But the artists do the exact opposite.
They really do.
The story opens in, well, what they call the recent past, and it's at what has to be the most mundane, unepic location imaginable.
A city bus stop.
A city bus stop.
The framing device is brilliant. We see this young, urban, upper caste man standing at a bus stop, and he is visibly frustrated.
Just complaining to anyone who will listen.
Yeah, complaining that he is stuck in a dead-end job. And he blames his situation entirely on, quote-unquote, damn job quotas.
Which, to give some context for you listening, he is talking about India's reservation policies.
Right.
These are basically affirmative action programs embedded in the Constitution, partly thanks to Ambedkar himself, actually, that reserve a certain percentage of government jobs and educational seats for marginalized castes, including Dalits.
And it's meant to help offset centuries of systemic discrimination.
Right. And it's important to pause here and look at what the authors are doing with this young man. He angrily declares, right there at the bus stop, that caste isn't real any longer. He calls it a non-issue.
He genuinely believes that.
Mm-hmm.
Because he lives in a modern city with buses and concrete buildings, he thinks the historical realities of caste oppression have just, vanished.
Like magic.
Right. And now these quotas are just unfairly holding him back.
Now, obviously, we have to point out that the debate around job quotas and reservation policies in India is a deeply complex, ongoing, highly charged political issue today.
Oh, absolutely.
And just to be completely clear, for the sake of this deep dive, we are looking at this strictly through the lens of the source material. We aren't here to litigate the politics of affirmative action or take a side.
Right, we're just analyzing the text.
Exactly. What is fascinating is how the creators use this specific, very recognizable modern grievance as a literary hook, because sitting next to this angry guy on the bench is a young woman reading a newspaper.
And she hears him say caste is a non-issue, and she immediately pushes back.
Yeah, she points out the glaring hypocrisy. She basically says, it's funny how people constantly claim caste isn't real, but caste never seems to go away.
And she uses his ignorance as the catalyst to start narrating the life of Dr. Ambedkar to him right there while they wait for the bus.
But, I'm still stuck on the location a bit. Why a bus stop?
Oh.
If you have this incredible, sweeping biography of a man who held dual doctorates and drafted the Constitution for the world's largest democracy, why ground it in a petty argument on a street corner?
Because of a concept our sources highlight called contemporaneity.
Contemporaneity. Okay, break that down.
It is the intentional tension between history and the present moment. Think about how we usually consume history. We prefer historicity.
Meaning what, exactly?
Meaning we like to look at the roots of a problem in the safe, distant past. We look at a black and white photo from 1901 and think, wow, things were terrible back then. Glad that's over.
Oh, I see. It creates a comfortable buffer.
Yeah.
Like you can study the oppression without feeling implicated by it today.
Exactly. Contemporaneity shatters that buffer. By putting the history in the mouth of a woman at a modern bus stop, arguing with a guy in modern clothes, the creators are forcing the reader to recognize that the past is absolutely not dead.
It's sitting right next to you on the bench.
Yes. The societal structures that Ambedkar fought against didn't magically evaporate just because cities got built.
It's like, okay, imagine you're trying to teach a really dense, profound history class about the American Civil Rights Movement, right?
Okay, yeah.
But instead of standing at a podium in a quiet university lecture hall, you are teaching it while standing in line at the DMV.
Oh, that's a great analogy.
You're talking to the person in front of you who is complaining about some, I don't know, bureaucratic form, and you use that mundane frustration to unpack massive abstract theories about structural inequality. It grounds the epic in the everyday.
It's highly effective. The reality is the target demographic for an English language graphic novel, which is usually an urban middle class or upper middle class reader, might actually share some of that young man's biases.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, they might live in highly curated, privileged urban bubbles where they don't see overt caste violence on a daily basis. So they adopt this sort of colorblind, or in this case, caste-blind mentality.
Assuming globalization and capitalism have leveled the playing field.
Exactly. The young man serves as an avatar for that specific reader.
Wow, so the book is literally holding up a mirror. It's saying, hey, if you think like this guy, you need to sit down on this bench and listen to this story too.
Precisely. It demands that the modern reader unlearn their assumptions in real time alongside the character. And the way the woman structures her narrative of Ambedkar's life is equally unconventional.
Right, she doesn't just give a chronological timeline, like 1891 he was born, then this happened.
No, not at all. She divides his life into books or thematic chapters based on the anatomy of deprivation.
The anatomy of deprivation, so categorizing the story by the denial of basic, fundamental human necessities.
Exactly. We have book 1, water, book 2, shelter, book 3, travel.
Which totally strips away the high-level political maneuvering and forces you to confront the visceral, bodily experience of marginalization.
Let's look deeply at book 1, water. This is the incident we mentioned at the very beginning of the deep dive. The year is 1901. He's just a boy in Satara.
Right. And the detail that really strikes me in the sources is the mechanical, physical reality of the untouchability being practiced.
Right. The tap is right there.
Yeah. The water is literally flowing through the pipes. But the social construct of purity and pollution is so powerful that it overrides the biological reality of a child's thirst.
It's baffling to think about.
If the young Bhim touches the tap, the high-caste Hindus believe the water itself, this flowing natural element, somehow becomes spiritually and physically polluted.
And what the creators are highlighting here is that this isn't just a story about a mean teacher or an unkind school environment. This isolated childhood memory is presented as a structural indictment of the entire society.
Right, the whole system.
The entire ecosystem of the school, the rules, the infrastructure, the social dynamics. It is engineered to deny a child a basic natural resource entirely based on the lottery of birth.
Water is essential for sustaining life, and yet the ideological framework of caste is treated as more important than the child's life.
Yeah.
And honestly, the really devastating part of the narrative is that achieving success, getting an education, rising up the economic ladder, none of it cures the disease. Which brings us to book 2, Shelter.
Set in 1917.
Right, 1917. And Bhim Rao is no longer a helpless 10-year-old boy. He is Dr. Ambedkar.
He has just returned from studying at Columbia University.
Which, again, huge deal.
A massive deal. He is highly educated, worldly, and he has actually been hired to work for the Maharaja of Baroda. He has a prestigious government position.
So he has achieved what many would consider the ultimate markers of merit and success.
Right. He has done exactly what society tells marginalized people to do, right?
Yeah.
Work hard, get an education, pull yourself up by your bootstraps.
Yeah, play by the rules. But when he arrives in Baroda to take up his post, he is completely denied accommodation.
Everywhere.
He can't stay in the Hindu hotels, so he tries to stay in a Parsi inn, hoping that since the Parsis are a different religious community, they might be more accommodating.
But he's driven out of there the moment they discover he is a Dalit.
Right. So then he appeals to his Hindu friends for a place to sleep. They turn him away.
Unbelievable.
In a final act of desperation, he turns to his Christian friends, and even they refuse to give him shelter.
And this sequence, the shelter chapter, is academically crucial for a comprehensive understanding of caste dynamics in South Asia.
Because it breaks a big misconception.
A huge misconception.
Yeah.
A very common, oversimplified view is that untouchability is strictly a Hindu theological problem, that it's confined entirely within the borders of Hindu religious texts and practices.
Right, so you would assume that if you step outside Hinduism into Christianity or Zoroastrianism, the caste rules wouldn't apply.
But this chapter shatters that assumption. It demonstrates historically that the ideology of caste purity and pollution was so virulent, so deeply embedded in the cultural bedrock of the subcontinent, that it infected the broader social landscape.
It transcended religious boundaries completely.
Yes. It infiltrated Parsi communities. It infiltrated Christian communities. It proves that caste was a pervasive societal disease, a structural hierarchy that everyone participated in and upheld, regardless of their specific theology.
It's entirely suffocating. Like, you can cross oceans, you can earn doctorates, you can change your religious surroundings, and you still cannot escape this invisible label pinned to your existence.
And that suffocation leads right into Book 3, Travel, which is set in 1934.
So what happens here?
Well, Dr. Ambedkar is in Chalisgan. He needs to travel to a specific neighborhood, a Mahar locality. But the local Tongawalas, the horse cart drivers, they completely refuse to let him sit in their carts.
Because of his caste.
Exactly. They're perfectly willing to take his money, but they will not drive him, because driving an untouchable would lower their own social standing in the town.
So wait, how does he get there?
Eventually, to solve the problem, the drivers allow Ambedkar to rent the cart, but they refuse to physically drive it.
Oh boy.
So a completely inexperienced novice from the Dalit community has to take the reins. And predictably, this leads to a disaster.
The cart crashes.
Yes. The novice loses control of the horse, the cart crashes, and Ambedkar is thrown out and severely injured.
Wow. And the travel chapter, I mean, based on our sources, it's just this masterful exposure of the psychological mechanics of the caste system.
Right. Think about the stark contrast in this scene. You have Dr. Ambedkar, a man who is literally shaping the political destiny of a nation, an intellectual giant.
Yeah.
And on the other side, you have a local cart driver who is likely uneducated, living in poverty, and occupying a very low rung on the economic ladder.
And yet, that cart driver looks at Dr. Ambedkar and feels an inherent, unquestionable sense of superiority.
Exactly. The driver's sense of self-worth is artificially inflated by the caste system.
Because the hierarchy maintains its power by ensuring that even the lower middle tiers of society have someone beneath them to step on.
It buys the complicity of the poor. It gives them a psychological wage, the comfort of knowing that no matter how bad their own lives are, they are still, quote-unquote, purer than the untouchable.
Which is just wild. The driver wields power over an international scholar simply because of birth. So we have these three intense claustrophobic narratives of confinement. Confinement from water, confinement from shelter, confinement from the basic right to travel safely.
Right. The entire story is about a man desperately trying to break out of the rigid, suffocating boxes that society has built around him.
And here is where the absolute brilliance of the publishers comes into play. Because they realize that if you are going to tell a story about breaking out of rigid social boxes, you cannot physically draw that story inside rigid comic book boxes.
Yes. This is perhaps the most revolutionary aspect of Bhimayana as a piece of art.
Okay, let's talk about the art because it is stunning.
S. Anand, the publisher at Navayana, initially approached several traditional Western-style comic book illustrators for the project.
Oh, he did? I didn't know that.
He did. But something felt fundamentally wrong about the aesthetic. It didn't fit.
Yeah.
So they changed course entirely and approached two Pardhan Gond artists, Durgabai Vyam and Subhash Vyam.
Let's give some context for Gond art for everyone listening, because it's not something you typically see in a graphic novel.
Not at all. Gond art is an indigenous tribal art form originating from central India. The Pardhan Gonds specifically were traditionally bards, musicians, and storytellers for the larger Gond community.
Okay.
And their visual art is historically a communal practice. It isn't drawn on paper, usually. It is painted onto the mud walls and floors of village homes during festivals and rituals.
Wow, so it's very physical, very grounded.
Very. It is deeply connected to nature, animism, and a very fluid understanding of time and space.
Which is pretty much the polar opposite of how Western graphic novels work.
Oh, completely.
Think about the masterpieces of the medium, right? Like Art Spiegelman's Mouse, or the intense graphic journalism of Joe Sacco, or even looking at the classic Indian comic series Amar Chitrakatha, which generations of Indian kids grew up reading.
Right.
They all rely on a very strict architectural grid.
The Western format is completely defined by sequential art. You have a square or a rectangular panel. The action happens inside that box.
Yeah.
Then there is a blank white space, which is called the gutter in comic terms. And then the next box, you read left to right, top to bottom.
Very linear, highly structured.
Right. It tells you exactly where to look and what moment in time you're experiencing.
But when the publisher showed these classic comic layouts to Durgabai and Subhash Vyam, their reaction was incredible.
They completely rejected the entire foundation of the medium.
They just looked at the boxes and said, no, This stifles the characters. We will not force them into enclosures.
They insisted on using a concept from their own artistic tradition called kula.
Kula. This is such a vital concept for you listening to grasp because it is basically the beating heart of how this book functions. So what does kula actually mean in practice?
Literally, kula translates to open space.
Open space.
Right. The Vyams wanted a visual landscape where there is room for all the elements to breathe. Instead of using harsh, straight black lines to draw boxes and trap the scenes, they utilized something called Dignas.
And Dignas are the patterns, right?
Yes. Dignas are these traditional, auspicious, sinuous geometric patterns that Gond artists usually apply to the walls and floors of their homes.
Okay, I see.
In Bhimayana, these organic flowing patterns snake across the massive pages. They divide the space and guide your eye, but they never enclose the characters.
So there are no hard borders.
None. The past, the present, the dialogue, the memories, they all bleed into one another across the curves of these patterns.
But why does this matter? I mean, if I'm listening to this, I might think, okay, so the layout is pretty. It's a nice stylistic choice. But it's so much more than that, isn't it?
Oh, it's deeply political.
It's like architecture. If you build a house with a bunch of tiny, windowless, compartmentalized rooms, you are dictating how the people inside that house feel and behave.
Exactly.
They will feel isolated, confined, separated from each other. But if you knock down all those walls and create an open floor plan, you change the psychology of the space. People can breathe, they can interact, the energy flows freely.
That's a perfect way to describe it.
So by refusing to draw gutters and rigid boxes, the Vyams are literally drawing the open, casteless, equal society that Dr. Ambedkar spent his entire life fighting for.
You've hit the nail on the head. In Bhimayana, the medium is the message. You cannot effectively protest an oppressive, compartmentalized social hierarchy using a compartmentalized hierarchical artistic format.
Right.
The sources draw a very sharp contrast here with the Amar Chitrakatha comics.
The mythological comics that are so popular in India.
Exactly. Amar Chitrakatha utilizes highly muscular, realistic, Western-style drawings.
Yeah.
The heroes look like classic superheroes.
Lots of action poses.
Right. And crucially, they're confined to strict grids, operating in unilinear time. It is a very ordered, almost authoritative way of telling a story.
Meaning it doesn't leave much room for interpretation.
No, it reflects a very specific, mainstream, often upper caste vision of Indian history and mythology. It tells the reader exactly what to think.
Whereas Bhimayana forces you to participate.
Yeah.
The art is flat, non-photorealistic, flowing folk art. You might have Ambedkar at age 10 on the top left of the page, and the modern young man at the bus stop on the bottom right, with absolutely no rigid lines separating their worlds.
You, the reader, have to actively navigate the open space. You have to find the connections yourself.
It's a democratized reading experience, which perfectly mirrors a democratic political ideal.
But this democratic layout requires the reader to do some work. Because it abandons Western photorealism and linear storytelling, the book demands that the reader learn an entirely new visual vocabulary.
Yeah, you really have to learn how to read all over again.
Exactly. Every single aesthetic choice on the page, every shape, every animal, every line is laden with deep political symbolism.
Which brings us to another one of those academic terms from our sources, multimodality.
Let's demystify that term real quick.
Yes, please.
Multimodality simply means that a text communicates its meaning through multiple different modes simultaneously.
Okay, so like a regular book is just one mode.
Right. In a traditional novel, you rely almost entirely on the written word. In a standard comic, you rely on the written word in the bubble, plus the facial expression of the character.
Sure.
But in a multimodal text like Bhimayana, you are relying on the interaction of shapes, textures, spatial layout, visual metaphors, and text, all working together at the exact same time to convey a complex emotional or political reality.
And the most immediate, striking example of this multimodality is how they handle the speech bubbles.
Oh, the speech bubbles are fascinating.
In a normal comic, a speech bubble is just a round white balloon with words in it. It's just a functional container. But in Bhimayana, the physical shape of the speech bubble reveals the moral and political stance of the character speaking.
There are three distinct shapes you have to learn to read here. First, for the characters whose speech is soft, the victims of the caste system, the people who are compassionate, who are striving for freedom and equality.
Yeah.
Their dialogue is enclosed in speech bubbles shaped like birds.
Shaped like birds. So even before you read the words, I am thirsty, you see the bird shape, and you instantly register vulnerability.
You register a desire for flight, for liberation.
It's so poetic.
It is. The bird symbolizes a gentle nature and a yearning for freedom. But then you have the oppressors.
Right, the other side.
For the characters who enforce the caste system, the people who spew hatred or deny water to a child. Their speech bubbles take the shape of a scorpion's tail.
Oh man, that is such a visceral choice. A scorpion's tail.
Yeah.
It literally curves around the text with a sharp stinger right at the end. It visually represents that their words carry a poisonous, lethal sting.
You look at the page, your brain registers the scorpion tail, and your body physically tenses up before you even process the dialogue inside.
You know immediately that this character is toxic.
It's brilliant visual shorthand. And then the third type is a thought bubble, which is used predominantly for Dr. Ambedkar.
How is that one different?
Well, instead of the typical Western thought bubble, which is usually, a little fluffy cloud with a trail of smaller circles leading down to the character's head, his thought bubbles have an eye drawn inside the stem.
An eye?
Specifically, a third eye.
Which is a profound cultural and religious symbol.
Yes. It is a subtle but incredibly powerful nod to Buddhism.
Because later in life he converts, right?
Exactly. Later in his life, Ambedkar famously renounced Hinduism and led a mass conversion of hundreds of thousands of Dalits to Buddhism, seeking a religion that didn't sanction caste inequality.
Right.
In Buddhist iconography, the third eye represents the inner eye of wisdom, enlightenment, and perception beyond ordinary sight.
Oh, wow. So by giving him this specific thought bubble, the artists are showing that his inner thoughts hold a deep, perceptive wisdom that maybe cannot always be spoken aloud in a discriminatory society.
Exactly. You are literally reading the politics of the characters through the physical shape of their words.
It's fascinating, but the multimodality extends way beyond just the text bubbles, too. The animal imagery in this book is everywhere, and it is doing an enormous amount of emotional heavy lifting.
This is a hallmark of Gond art. In the Gond worldview, the natural world is deeply intertwined with human experience.
Like they aren't separate.
Animals, trees, rivers, they aren't just passive background decoration. They are active, observing participants in the story.
So going back to book one, the scene where 10-year-old Bim is dying of thirst, a Western artist would draw a highly detailed, realistic face of a boy crying or sweating.
Yes.
But the Viams don't do that. They draw the boy's actual torso morphing into a large fish,
He is literally a fish out of water.
gasping for life on the dry ground. It takes this political demand for a natural resource and turns it into a visceral, biological agony. You feel the suffocation of the fish.
And pay attention to how the broader societal conflict is depicted too. The tension and violence between the upper caste oppressors and the Dalits is frequently represented as a tussle between wild beasts and prey animals.
What kind of animals?
You'll see roaring lions dominating the page, representing the intimidation and predatory nature of the upper castes.
Okay.
And they're contrasted with cows, which represent the Dalits, who are expected by society to be docile, subservient, and easily preyed upon.
But even the inanimate objects get infused with this natural life. There is a scene where Ambedkar and his followers are traveling on a train, but it's not drawn as a metal machine.
No, it's alive.
The train is drawn as this magnificent, slithering, feline snake creature with eyes staring out from the wheels.
Yeah.
And later, when they finally find a water pump that they are allowed to use, the handle of the pump isn't just a piece of iron. It is drawn as a motherly elephant's trunk, generously curving down to offer water.
The sources specifically highlight that water pump. They note that the pump is depicted as a mother figure with open arms.
Why a mother figure specifically?
Because a mother, in her ideal form, does not discriminate between her children. She provides sustenance for all of them equally. The elephant trunk represents the natural, undiscriminating flow of resources.
Which stands in stark contrast to the highly discriminatory human society surrounding it.
Exactly.
Okay, I have to push back here, though.
Okay, go ahead.
I totally understand the brilliance of the fish, the lions, the elephant trunk. But here is where I get a little lost when looking at the art. We have all these rich, evocative metaphors for suffering. But when you look at the human faces in the book, they are totally blank.
Blank.
Yeah. Every single human figure, regardless of whether they are a Dalit child, an upper caste teacher, a man, a woman, a Hindu, a Parsi, they are all drawn with the exact same black and white textures, the same repetitive line work, and what the sources describe as bovinely sedate eyes.
Oh, yes.
The faces are almost entirely expressionless. If you were writing a book about immense, agonizing human suffering, wouldn't stripping the characters of their facial expressions make it harder to empathize with them? It feels like it creates an emotional distance.
It's a very fair question, and honestly, it's a reaction many readers have initially,
Right.
because we're just so conditioned by Western media.
Right.
In a Western comic, empathy is generated by hyper-focusing on the individual's face, the furrowed brow, the tear falling down the cheek.
The expressions.
But in Bhimayana, that lack of facial distinction isn't a flaw. It is actually the ultimate political statement of the entire book.
Wait, really? How so?
By drawing all human beings with the exact same visual textures and the same sedate eyes, the Vyams are visually enforcing the universal human equality that the caste system vehemently denies.
Oh.
The entire architecture of the caste system relies on categorizing people, viewing them as fundamentally different types of beings, almost different species, based entirely on their birth.
The upper castes are inherently pure, the lower castes are inherently polluted?
Yes, so the art is flat out refusing to acknowledge those visual markers of difference.
That is so smart.
The artists are basically saying, look closely. Stripped of your societal labels, stripped of your clothes and your titles, you are all made of the exact same lines. You're all fundamentally equal.
So it forces you to look at the surroundings to understand the dynamic.
Exactly. You have to look at the scorpion tail bubble, or the roaring lion, or the pointing fingers, to understand the social hierarchy, because the humanity of the figures is depicted as identical.
That is incredibly profound. You have to look at the weapons of oppression because the bodies themselves are equal. And you just mentioned the pointing fingers. That's another recurring visual motif that really stood out in the sources. You see these disembodied hands with fingers pointing at them from all directions throughout the narrative.
Yes, the pointing finger operates on multiple symbolic levels here.
Like what?
Well, on the primary level, it represents the accusatory blame of the oppressors. It is the constant suffocating policing of Dalit bodies, pointing out where they cannot go, which they cannot drink from, which cart they cannot ride in.
It is the visual embodiment of social exclusion and surveillance.
It's the finger of judgment.
But on a secondary, more triumphant level, it mirrors something very specific to the Indian landscape.
Oh, the statues.
Yes. All across India, there are thousands of statues of Dr. Ambedkar, and almost all of them depict him in a suit, holding the Constitution, with one arm outstretched, pointing his finger forward.
He is pointing toward the future, toward education, toward progress, and a casteless society.
Right. So within the pages of this book, the pointing finger is a contested symbol. It is both the weapon of the oppressor trying to keep you in your place and the guiding beacon of the liberator showing you the way out.
It's just layers upon layers of meaning.
It really is. And all of these layers, the open kula layout, the scorpion tails, the identical faces, the pointing fingers, they are all in service of a very specific educational goal.
Right, which the sources explicitly state the creators intended this book to generate post-colonial critical literacy.
And this is the final major academic concept we need to dissect today, and arguably the most crucial one for you, the listener, to internalize.
Absolutely.
So what makes critical literacy different from just reading a book?
Well, basic literacy is simply the mechanical act of decoding words on a page.
Sure, reading the sentence.
Right, reading the sentence, the 10-year-old boy was denied water, and understanding the plot point. But critical literacy goes much, much deeper.
How deep?
Critical literacy is reading that text and suddenly realizing how your own personal life, your own privileges, the town you live in, the school you went to, how all of that is intimately connected to massive socio-historical power structures.
Oh, wow.
It is the realization that the text is not just a story. It is a reflection of a system that you are currently participating in.
It's waking up to your own position on the chessboard.
Exactly. It demands that the reader ask, who wrote this?
Mm-hmm.
Who benefits from this narrative? And how am I complicit in the structures being described?
And Bhimayana forces this wake-up call in a very jarring, unavoidable way.
It does this through the news clippings.
Yes! This completely blew my mind when I read about it. The artists don't just stick to drawing historical scenes from 1901 or 1934. They literally weave actual modern-day newspaper clippings right into the flowing Gond artwork.
They do. For instance, while you are totally immersed in the historical narrative of young Bhim being denied water, you will turn the page, and nestled right within the curves of the Dignas, there is a scanned reproduction of a real newspaper article about the Kurlanji massacre.
Which, for listeners who might not know, the Kurlanji massacre was a horrific, real-life event that occurred in 2006 in the Indian state of Maharashtra. A Dalit family, the Pultmanjas, were brutally tortured and murdered by an upper caste mob over a land dispute.
It was a stark, gruesome reminder of the extreme violence that enforces the caste system today.
Right, and by taking that modern journalistic report of atrocities and physically embedding it right next to the historical folk art depictions of Ambedkar's childhood, the book just shatters any lingering illusion the reader might have that this is just a history lesson.
Remember the contemporaneity we discussed earlier at the bus stop?
Yes.
This is its ultimate execution. You cannot look at the 1901 drawing and say, oh, glad that's over. Because the 2006 newspaper clipping is staring you right in the face on the very same page.
It's like the book grabs you by the collar and says, don't you dare distance yourself from this. The water is still being denied. The violence is still happening outside your window right now.
It demands an active, uncomfortable engagement from the reader.
It forces the privileged reader to ask themselves, how am I complicit in a system that allows this to continue? What invisible boxes am I enforcing in my own daily life?
Exactly.
But, if we are going to talk about critical literacy, and if we are going to honestly examine complicity, then we really have to turn that critical lens onto the book itself.
Oh, the irony of the market.
Yes. We have to look at this book as a physical object existing in the modern capitalist world, and honestly, this is where it gets a little uncomfortable.
Several of the critical reviews in our sources point out a glaring irony regarding the market for this book.
It is a vital debate among scholars who study protest literature. Let's lay out the contradiction. Here is the reality. The artists, Durgabai and Subhashvam, belong to a marginalized tribal community. Their art form, Gond art, is traditionally a communal spiritual practice.
Right, it belongs to the village, it belongs to the walls and the earth.
But in the creation of Bhimayana, that traditional community-based art has been commodified. It has been digitized, printed onto high-quality paper, bound into a glossy graphic novel, and sold for 395 rupees.
Which, in the context of the Indian book market, especially back in 2011, is a pretty significant amount of money.
It is not a cheap mass-market paperback.
No, not at all.
So we have to ask, who is buying a 395 rupee English-language graphic novel? The primary consumers are the urban, English-speaking, upper-middle-class elites.
The exact demographic that historically marginalized these tribal artists.
Yes. The very demographic that historically benefited the most from the caste system is now purchasing their art as an aesthetic commodity. They are putting it on their coffee tables to show how progressive they are.
That's a tough look.
Doesn't that just reek of capitalism commodifying a protest? Does packaging a narrative of deep systemic rebellion for a global market dilute its power? Are we just turning a scream for justice into an exclusive commodity?
It is the classic dilemma of subaltern art entering the mainstream. Is it selling out, or is it a Trojan horse?
Right.
While the commodification is undeniable, many scholars in our sources argue strongly for the Trojan horse theory.
Walk me through that. How is a 395 rupee book a Trojan horse?
Well, think about the reach and the impact. Yes, it is a commodity consumed by the elite. But look at what that commodity is actively doing once it gets inside their homes.
What do you mean?
It is infiltrating the living rooms, the private schools, and the university syllabi of the privileged classes. It takes a narrative of deep subaltern protest and smuggles it past the defenses of the elite reader because it looks like a beautiful exotic art book.
Oh, I see.
But once they open it, it forces them to consume a narrative of their own complicity. It uses the very culture they historically ignored or marginalized to deliver a devastating critique of their privilege.
So it's using the master's tools to dismantle the master's house, or at least rearrange the furniture.
Very much so.
And it's important to note the agency of the artists themselves here. Durgabai and Subhashvam aren't just passive victims of capitalism.
No, they were actively involved in the conceptualization.
When the publishers tried to give them Western comic boxes, they said no. They imposed their own cultural framework, the Kula, the Dignas, onto a mass media format. They bent the global publishing machine to their own will.
Precisely. It is a subversion from within the system. It uses the mechanisms of the global capitalist publishing market to validate, elevate, and disseminate a subaltern history that mainstream textbooks and standard histories have far too often ignored, sanitized, or erased completely.
It provides immense agency and global recognition to the Pardhan Gond artists, ensuring their visual language is studied in universities worldwide.
It's a complex, messy, brilliant piece of work.
It really is. Okay, let's take a breath and look back at this incredible landscape we've just traversed today.
We covered a lot of ground.
We did. We started at a perfectly mundane urban bus stop, listening to a young man complain about job quotas. And from that single spark of modern frustration, we descended into a profound exploration of systemic deprivation.
We felt the biological agony of a boy denied water, the psychological suffocation of a scholar denied shelter, and the bitter irony of a cart ride.
We witnessed how traditional Pardhan Gond artists shattered the architectural constraints of the Western comic book. They replaced rigid boxes and blank gutters with the breathing, flowing space of Kula and the unifying lines of the Dignas.
We learned how to read a completely new visual vocabulary. We learned to feel the sting of the scorpion tail, the yearning of the bird bubble, and the wisdom of the third eye.
We saw human faces stripped of their societal markers, demanding that we recognize a universal equality.
And finally, we saw how the collision of historical art and modern news clippings forces us into a state of critical literacy, demanding that we examine our own position within the ongoing realities of social hierarchy.
So, what is the ultimate takeaway for you listening right now? Maybe you live halfway across the world from India. Maybe you were entirely unfamiliar with the history of Dr. Ambedkar or the nuances of the caste system before today. Why does Bhimayana matter to you?
It matters because it proves, unequivocally, that how we tell a story is just as important as the story itself. The medium shapes our understanding of reality.
Yeah.
This book asks us to look up from its pages and identify the invisible boxes and gutters operating in our own societies. It asks us, what are the rigid lines we use to separate us from them? Who is being denied their basic humanity, their water, their shelter in our own backyards?
It makes you hyper-aware of the structures you live inside of every single day, and that leads me to a final lingering thought for you to mull over as we end this deep dive.
Let's hear it.
We've spent all this time talking about how the physical layout of a graphic novel, the presence or absence of drawn boxes on a page, can subconsciously train our brains to either accept or reject social hierarchies.
Right. The boxes tell us who belongs where.
Exactly. So if a simple comic book grid can do that, what are the rigid algorithmic boxes of our modern digital screens silently training you to accept about your place in the world today?
That's a chilling thought.
Think about the endless, perfectly squared off feeds of your social media. Think about the digital bubbles that only show you content you already agree with, isolating you from differing realities.
Yeah.
If the Viams knock down the walls of the comic book to create a free, equal space for the mind to breathe, how do we break out of the digital boxes that are currently defining and dividing our society right now?
It seems the textbook we threw out at the beginning of this deep dive wasn't just made of paper. The boxes are everywhere.
They really are. The structures are complex, the history is bleeding into the present, and the walls are often invisible. But now, at least, we know how to spot the scorpion tails.